It's Emil Guillermo. Emil, Amok to you. How are you? It's one of those days. I was all set. I was all prepared, and then I got discombobulated because there was the former president of the United States speaking, and he was speaking about sort of it pertains to what we're doing here. We're talking about information on social media, and first of all, I was looking for the speech, the actual speech, President Obama's speech at Stanford. I thought maybe it'd be on C-SPAN, but actually it was carried on some of the networks, or one network in particular. And then, but I didn't look there because I don't usually watch that network, but I went to YouTube, and of course there it was. Social media, where it deserves to be. President Obama just gave his speech, just finished about within the last 30 minutes or so, about disinformation and social media and the impact on our democracy and what we need to do now as a nation to ward off what is happening in the world. It's an important speech, and I will touch on it, but I had a couple of things I wanted to talk about. So before we get to that, in the Lanyap section of this program, the Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable, the micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs, although you don't have to be Asian American, Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian, or an Asian American X, name your ethnicity, Asian American Vietnamese, AAVs, Asian American Cambodians, AACs, Asian American Chinese, AACHs. That's why. No. Achs. I have many friends who are Achs, or an Asian American Filipino, as I am. Anyway, if you're watching us on social media, you're watching us on YouTube, perhaps. Emil Guillermo is, I think, the YouTube channel. Facebook, Emil Guillermo .media, or on Twitter at Emil Amok, EMILAMOK. Welcome. So there were a couple things I wanted to take care of first. First of all, did you know that Asian Americans have a new exalted position holder in the White House? Well, he's not new, but I hadn't heard of him before today, but they're taking action. Rahul Gupta, Dr. Rahul Gupta. And I'm sure you know some Guptas in your lives, and you know some Rahuls. I know some Rahuls. So I knew instantly, Rahul Gupta, South Asian American doctor. He's the drug czar, and he's out there. He announced on television today how they're going to fight the problem, the drug addiction problem, right where it exists. They're going to go to the places where the addictions are happening, and they're going to make sure that you get the thing you need that's the antidote to your overdose. And he cited a statistic that was pretty appalling that said most people who overdose, and recently there was a big report that said just how many overdoses, particularly fentanyl, are out there in the nation. But Rahul Gupta says, we're going to attack it there. We're going to make sure if you are suffering or if you are undergoing some kind of overdose situation, you get the medication you need, which I think is novel, right? I mean, you would say, well, why don't they do that ordinary? No, they don't. That was the point. He was saying that like maybe less than 10% of the people out there who are suffering or who overdose, when they do, less than 10% get access to this. So of course they die. So I thought that was a positive thing. Hats off to Rahul Gupta for starting or beginning this program. We know that fentanyl deaths in drugs that people think are, well, this is either pure X, Y, or Z, but no, it's cut with fentanyl, and the fentanyl is a killer. And he's saying, look, this is how we're going to solve this immediately. We're going to go to where the problem is, and we're going to make sure that those people who are suffering or being threatened with overdose, that they're taken care of right away. Let's see how it works out. I know a lot of people are going to be naysayers and say, well, aren't you kind of encouraging people to use drugs? No, we're trying to save lives. Right? That's what the drug czar said. And Dr. Rahul Gupta, I want to trust him. I want to encourage him. I know a lot of people out there are doing drugs and they're doing drugs like taking painkillers, for example, because they might have, it starts off as a functional thing to deal with pain, not as a recreational thing. It may ultimately become a recreational thing, but when people are going to painkillers for actual pain and dying, that's not a good thing. Now, there are people who get cocaine and heroin, and they're cut with fentanyl too, and they're dying. That's not a good thing. Let's hope that Dr. Gupta, Rahul Gupta, the White House's drug czar, is successful in his plan, because once you get people's lives saved, then maybe then you can go after the bigger problem of what to do with drugs at the border, drugs coming into the country, all that. Let's try to save lives first. Of course, talk show transition point. I also wanted to talk briefly, before we get to the Obama speech, I wanted to talk about this Camden Catholics story, because this bothers me a lot, and so soon after Holy Week. But it's the reality that the Catholic Church really is in trouble. We are just scratching the surface when it comes to how bad things are, but when they're settling for $85 million, 300 people came forward and sued the Catholic Church in Camden. That's roughly about 290,000. And this is over several decades. When you think about it, you say 300,000, less than 300,000 each, for what someone who you trusted did to wreck your life. Is that enough? I think Camden, the Archdiocese of Camden, got lucky there. But as a number of editorials pointed out, there is a window here that may be closing. There are much bigger settlements that took place against the Catholic Church, and judgments against the Catholic Church that took place in California and Oregon. 85 million still is higher than what happened in Boston. And we know the reaction in Boston was extreme. Well, not extreme, quite natural. When the church and the revered figureheads of the church commit this kind of crime against their flock, how can you go back to the church? I think that's sort of one of the big problems with modern Catholicism today. We got to take out the F word, forgiveness, at some point, but this has been a chronic problem in Catholicism, and unless you address it in a real structural way, like, is it because we don't give a larger role to women in the Catholic Church? Like, no role at all, except, nuns, and they can't be priests. I know a number of women who left the Catholic Church because they couldn't be priests. Now they're priests in the Episcopal Church. And I know that there are charges, these same kind of charges, in other churches, but not to the great degree that there are in the Catholic Church. I bring this up because we come out of Holy Week and we get this story it breaks on the Tuesday after Easter. We're still in Easter. Easter is an octave type of holiday, 8 days. And we also know that Easter, the actual days of Easter, there's like 50 days of Easter. It's like 10 days more than Lent. Got to think about this. One of the most, after Christmas, or it's like right there with Christmas, the most holy day of the Catholic year. And now you have to deal with this notion that, God, the church is not what we think it is. It never was what we thought it was. It's hard to be a Catholic. If you are I'm Filipino American. We are notoriously Catholic. I bring this up because I know that this is something that either Catholics have just sort of like, they've just moved off of. They don't think about it. The less they think about it, the better. Or they're so enraged as they'll say, whenever that offering plate comes in, I say, I'm not here to support the church. In fact, do you notice how a lot of dioceses, archdioceses, they're going into bankruptcy to protect themselves, and each church is its own little fiefdom now, because each, like, parish, because they need to protect themselves against the kind of damages that can be assessed against the whole thing, the whole church. You know, the diocese, whole diocese, archdiocese, and then the subdiocese, and then the parish. I'm telling you, the Catholic Church it's in need of reform, major reform, if it's to survive. Because I just looked at the Camden thing and I just said, not again. And you know, there's got to be a ton of Filipinos in Camden. A lot of Asian Americans. I'm sure of that. There were 300 who are part of this suit. Like I said, they settled for $85 million. There was an editorial that suggested that maybe they settled for less because pedophilia has been weaponized to such a degree that maybe you're not going to get a better settlement going forward. That was one suggestion I saw, an editorial, a Jersey editorial, saying maybe they settled because the way pedophilia is being weaponized and bandied about as a well, you know, it's being used to destroy people, right? And that, like, the whole child pornography thing was a ploy used against Ketanji Brown Jackson, which was ludicrous, right? Just as ludicrous as QAnon and the whole thing about, Hillary Clinton is a pedophile and Pizzagate and all that. But that's how people use an issue like pedophilia, spread it on social media, use it to create emotional responses. And this one editorial I was reading was suggesting that maybe the 300 who sued the church decided to settle because this may be as good as it gets, and that there won't be much sympathy for those who claim pedophilia because there are all these other charges and claims of pedophilia that's sort of confusing or creating some confusion out there in society. I don't know. I know that for me as a Catholic, I'm not as concerned about the money part. I'm just concerned that there were 300 people who sued, and the Catholic Church willingly settled for a large amount of money, $85 million. I think the issue now is, if you're a good Catholic, you have to find a way to be a good Catholic in this modern world. And here's the ironic thing. It may mean being Catholic without the organized Catholic Church. Can that be done? Yeah. I mean, yeah, community is nice, but when the community is proven to be a group of, well, I know they're a good priest too, but it's in the culture so much that one wonders what happens unless there is some structural reform that means something in the Catholic Church. Just wanted to get that off my chest the week after Holy Week. So that's the Catholic Church. I was going to talk about that. I was going to talked about Rahul Gupta, the drug czar. Now, I was just minding my business, doing some emails, and then there popped up President Obama today. And I do want to talk about his speech because his speech was really, really pretty good today. I mean, you wonder, well, what's the next thing? What does a president decide is his new mission, after the presidency? Like, Jimmy Carter's building homes. Clinton, he's got his foundation. Everyone has a foundation, but I'm not sure exactly what the Clinton Foundation did except get attacked for taking money. The Obama Foundation wants to talk about technology and social media and democracy and disinformation. And here's something interesting what he said today. He said, it's clear that social media needs some kind of regulation. And it's going to be up to social media to contribute and regulate itself to a degree, but also to Congress. Here's what he said, regulation could be a good thing.
The regulatory structure, a smart one, needs to be in place, designed in consultation with tech companies and experts and communities that are affected, including communities of color and others that sometimes are not well represented here in Silicon Valley.
See, now that's a good point. He mentioned diversity because we're part of this. Asian Americans, Black, Indigenous, people of color, we're part of this. It's not just a white thing out there on Twitter, TikTok, Yahoo, or YouTube. And he said that we need this sense of the companies working with the people, right? The tech companies working in consultation with communities and experts. We got to be inclusive. So he's talking to Silicon Valley and to a group of students at Stanford, students and other Stanford folks. Here's more of Obama.
That will allow these companies to operate effectively while also slowing the spread of harmful content. In some cases, industry standards may replace or substitute for regulation, but regulation has to be part of the answer.
And that's the thing that a lot of free enterprise types want to balk at. Oh, regulation, no good. Regulation, it will impede our innovation. No, it will make sure that things don't go amok in a bad way. Oh, there's that word, amok. In a bad way. Regulation in the past has been there. It has not impeded innovation. And that was a major point that Obama got to today. And then he said there should be some, he said there should be some transparency, some scrutiny. That was important. And then he said, most important, he said we had to safeguard about the relationship between social media, nationalism, and domestic hate groups.
They do need to engage with vulnerable populations. about how to put better safeguards in place to protect minority populations, ethnic populations, religious minorities, wherever they operate. So, for example, in the United States, they should be working with, not always contrary to, those groups that are trying to prevent voter suppression. That specifically has targeted black and brown communities.
See, now that's important, because where is the information coming out that targets, that says that, the vote was stolen, that, people who shouldn't be voting are voting, they're not citizens. The social media companies should also be working with the other groups who are saying, hey, wait a minute. Let's work with these folks who are targeting black and brown communities to vote, to actually go out and be participants in democracy. So the bottom line for Obama is that companies have to do a lot better.
In other words, these companies need to have some other North Star other than just making money and increasing market share.
See, that's an important thing, because when you're talking about tech companies, what people like to talk about is, I'm going to get stock options, we're going to be rich, we're going to transform society. And then, of course, when they go to market and get the big dough, pay off the investors, then it's shareholders. And the one phrase that really dictates everything they do is shareholder value. It's not societal values. It's not people values. It's not, is this inclusive? Is this helping minorities? Is this helping people on the fringe of society? No. Tech companies' allegiance is the shareholder value, stockholders. And that's what needs to change, according to Obama, who says they need some other North Star.
Fix the problem that, in part, they helped create, but also to stand for something bigger.
Stand for something bigger, like democracy, like America. Hey, that's a good idea. Good idea, right?
And to the employees of these companies and to the students here at Stanford who might well be future employees of these companies, you have the power to move things in the right direction. You can advocate for change. You can be part of this redesign. And if not, you can vote with your feet and go work with companies that are trying to do the right thing.
So that's kind of this is the idea on the supply side. He said, here's how we fix this problem of disinformation, fix this problem of a failure in our democracy. On the supply side, we got to look at these tech companies and we got to do better. And we can be part of a redesign of the tech companies so that we serve not shareholders, but we share the public interest, societal interest. Good point. A worthy thing for a former president to be talking about, the former leader of the free world, to be talking about inclusion when you talk about the thing that perhaps is much more of a contributor to the divisions that exist in society. Social media, misinformation or disinformation through social media. So Obama talked about the supply side. Now he goes, of course, to the other side.
Let's talk about the demand side of the equation.
The demand side. Oh, that's the people. That's the consumers. That's us. Okay, the demand side.
It starts with breaking through our information bubbles. Look, I understand that there are a whole bunch of people in this country who have views diametrically opposed to mine. I promise.
And he's talking about people who like him, like me. I mean, I don't disagree with Obama too much, but I also see him as a centrist. I also see him as the great compromiser. I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I just mean that there are things that, he sells you on the wish and the hope, and he delivers you on the reality, or to the reality. And the reality has been, I was hoping for that, and we got this. I guess that's just the way it is. That's politics, right? And we'll reach and strive for more the next time and come back more toward the middle and satisfy all. So, I mean, there's a whole spectrum of people who don't totally agree with Obama, but in general, I do like President Obama.
They tell me all the time. I get it. I'm not suggesting that all of us have to spend our days reading opinions we disagree with or looking for media stories that fundamentally don't share our values. But it is possible to broaden our perspectives. An interesting study came out recently, and this is just one study, so take it with a grain of salt. The researchers paid a large group of regular Fox News watchers to watch CNN for almost a month.
See, now this is kind of interesting. Here's a study. Watch, have the Fox people watch CNN for a month and see how much they like Jake Tapper. I'm not sure.
And these were not swing voters. These were hardcore, Hannity, Carlson fans, right? They're right there. And what the researchers found was that at the end of the month, people's views on certain issues, like whether voting by mail should be allowed or whether electing Joe Biden would lead to more violence against police. On some of these issues, their views have changed by 5, 8, 10 points. These people didn't suddenly turn into liberals. I'm sure they still don't like me. But at the margins, they had reshaped their perspectives in meaningful ways. Studies like this show our opinions aren't fixed. And that means our divisions aren't fixed either. If we can agree on some common baseline of facts and agree on some common baseline of how we debate and sort out our disagreements.
See, now, this is interesting because it shows that people can be persuaded. People, if they're exposed to different silos, in this case, the Fox people to the CNN, I'm sure it goes the other way too. It all depends on, what silo you're in, or if you're willing to go from silo to silo. Wouldn't it be nice if all the silos, which stand up like poles out in the field, if suddenly just all vertical, what if they suddenly collapsed and were much more horizontal and they cut across and everyone can see, and it wasn't a silo but a horizontal, more general, universal, everyone can access? What if we were all there? And what if we got the same thing so we can then understand different issues with the same relevant facts, and we can agree to debate, sort out our disagreements in a civil way? That's the old way. And that sounds like what Obama is advocating, that at least we've got to expose ourselves to some of the other silos.
The divisions that exist in this country aren't going away anytime soon, but the information we get, the stories we tell ourselves can, as Lincoln said, encourage the better angels of our nature. They can also encourage the worst. And a healthy democracy depends on our better angels being encouraged. So, as citizens, we have to take it upon ourselves to become better consumers of news, looking at sources, thinking before we share, and teaching our kids to become critical thinkers who know how to evaluate sources and separate opinion from fact.
And this is the part of his speech where he goes into the need for journalism, the need for local journalism, the need for local sources, not necessarily the big nationalized kind of sources. I mean, at some point, some of the media folks think, oh, national is better, right? Because national is big, more audience, but also more polarizing. When what we really want to know is what's happening in our backyards, what's happening with local, and local, because of the numbers, because of the way that companies make money, right? They make money on advertising. They make money on having a larger audience. You make more money on larger audiences that are national rather than the audiences that are local. Except, I mean, if you're big market, large market, then that's not an issue as much. But in the smaller markets, it's true. And it's why you have big markets aggregating smaller markets. Like, for example, this is a problem even in the San Francisco Bay Area. When you have one big paper or one big news organization in San Francisco, and I say this because this is an example that I know because I worked through this. If you're in San Francisco, which city hall do you cover? Wouldn't the people in Vallejo like to have their city hall covered so they know what was going on? How about in all the other communities, Fremont, San Jose? And in fact, the broadcasters had to get together and say, okay, well, look, we represent all the big markets, San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, in the Bay Area, and they had to conglomerate to build the audience, to make the money. And the thing that suffers is coverage because money was so important. I suppose this is where cable came in, because in the old days they had local cable stations, and they would cover, if you were in the Bay Area, they would cover just Daly City, or they would cover just Marin County, or they would cover Oakland. And then you'd have highly localized news, but no one wanted to see it. They didn't survive, because when it comes to TV and media, people get, I don't know, they say, oh, that's not good. I can't watch that. And so here's Obama today saying, we need to have some kind of rethinking about journalism, modern journalism in the digital world, in the social media world. And we have to do more about local news so that people are connected in their communities. And so that's where the divide and the divisions that really hamper our society could end. When local communities see themselves and others and see not, the culture wars, but they see that, hey, these are our community members. They're like us. And we got to solve these problems. Anyway, that's Obama today. Let me see if I get to the end point of his speech. He says, and this is important too, because he talks about what's happening around the world, especially in Russia. He says we just take for granted our freedoms. We take for granted our democracy. And we have to fight for the truth. We have to fight for the thing that sustains our democracy.
It is a chance for all of us to fight for truth. Not absolute truth, not a fixed truth, but to fight for what deep down we know is more true, is right. It's a chance for us to do that, not just because we're afraid of what will happen if we don't, but because we're hopeful about what can happen if we do.
The truth, that's what we're looking for. What if we looked for the truth? You know, so here it talks about Putin.
Putin at that time had receded from the foreground, and you had all these folks who were working to make Russia better. And then we were reminiscing and thinking about that moment of possibility and what might have happened to him. And now in Russia, those who control the information have led public opinion further and further and further and further away from the facts until all of a sudden almost a quarter of the country's combat power has been damaged or destroyed in what the government is claiming is a, quote, special military operation. That's what happens when societies lose track of what is true. On the other hand, the last couple of months have also shown what can happen when the world pushes back. We have seen it in the people, including some of our Obama leaders in Europe, who are organizing on social media to help Ukrainian refugees, offering food and shelter and jobs and rides. We've seen it in an IT army of volunteers who work to break through Russia propaganda and reach out to mothers of Russian soldiers, asking them to call on Putin to bring their sons home. And we've seen it in the combination of old and new media, like a viral image of a Russian TV editor walking into a live shot with a handwritten sign calling for an end to the war. Handwritten sign was a tool. TV is a tool. The internet is a tool. Social media is a tool. At the end of the day, tools don't control us. We control them, and we can remake them. It's up to each of us to decide what we value, and then use the tools we've been given to advance those values.
And that's President Obama speaking at Stanford today. I mean, I'm glad that he's taking this up, because I think this is the issue for the 21st century. When you see the rise of autocracies and the demise of democracies, because democracies have just taken their freedom for granted. And he gets into that a little earlier in the speech. He talks about the First Amendment. He talks about being close to an absolutist for the First Amendment. And I find myself more an absolutist when it comes to the First Amendment, in terms of if I hear speech I don't agree with, or speech that I consider bad speech, well then bad speech attracts good speech, should attract more speech. And then we have what is called debate. That's ideally what should happen. We don't have, I have my speech and I like mine better than yours, so you shut up. We don't have that. We have a call for speech. If you disagree with somebody, great. I might disagree with someone I might have seen on any of the cable channels an hour, 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago. Here I am. talking my opinion. So it's out there, but once again, which silo are you in, and are you going to hear, or who are you going to hear from which silo out there? You have to be a more savvy news consumer. You need to be a more, not just savvy, but a more Catholic, meaning universal news consumer, getting as much as you can. And then at that point, you can make the kind of decision you need to make. Because right now, we don't seem to be at that point. And that is what's making this era, this time, really critical in our history. Will democracy win out? Will truth win out? Will the stories of truth win out versus the autocracy and the stories they put out that are manufactured, that are lies, that are not truthful? That's where we are in 2022. Well, a couple of other things before we depart for the day. President Obama is giving more weaponry to, no, President Biden, excuse me. President Obama is fighting the other war. He's fighting misinformation, disinformation, he called it. But look, I respect what Joe Biden is doing. He's giving another $800 million to the Ukrainians, and this brings the total to something like around $3.4 billion to Ukraine. They need it. At some point, I asked this question a week ago, going into Holy Week. I just wondered aloud, who are the voices of peace? It cannot be a voice of peace, or you can't be a voice for peace if you're throwing billions of dollars of weapons at a situation that is causing the amount of death that this Russian-Ukrainian war is causing. At some point, you have to say, what can we do to get those peace talks going again? I mean, there's some more sanctions that were put on yesterday, more against oligarchs, but everything is so incremental and everything takes time, and nothing is going to stop Putin cold to make him see, oh, I've done a grave disservice to the world and to my own Russian people, and I should stop this war. We haven't gotten to that pressure point yet, and I don't know what will. But every time I see, well, here comes another 800 million. And then we had Biden speaking today. It actually was interesting because he tried to invoke, or he did invoke, Teddy Roosevelt.
We won't always be able to advertise everything that our partners are doing to support Ukraine and fight for freedom, but to modernize Teddy Roosevelt's famous advice, sometimes we will speak softly and carry a large javelin, because we're sending a lot of those in as well.
So, speak softly, carry a large javelin. That's what they need. I'm glad they're sending some javelins, but you're not a voice for peace if all you're doing is weaponizing or supplying the weapons for war. I think we need more people talking about real peace, because the idea of this thing going on forever and ever, it's daunting. So this is one of those things where you just don't know what's next. The United States doesn't know, but it will provide arms as a member of NATO, and NATO will stand at the ready, but not engage because Ukraine is not a member of NATO. But I have to think that some smarter minds aren't coming together trying to figure out a way to get Putin to say, that's it. Let's talk. Because that is what's needed right now. All right. I was watching the Giants game this morning. You know, this is the thing about sports. I was watching the NBA yesterday. I was watching the Giants yesterday and today. Here's the thing about sports. And I say this because I'm a sports fan. I know some people out there aren't. But here's the thing about sports. It gives us something innocuous to talk about. It gives us a way to be on the same team. It gives us a way to let off steam in a somewhat safe way. Although there are people who go crazy about their teams. Like the other day, right? Kyrie Irving was being cursed out by the Boston fans. The Boston fans cursed Kyrie Irving. Boston had the last laugh on Kyrie Irving because Kyrie Irving and the Brooklyn Nets lost yesterday. But, you know, we need something like sports to be that distraction. It's just unfortunate that we also need to regulate the distraction so we don't take our eyes off the real thing that's at issue, which is the prevention of World War III. And what's the best way to go about that? Sometimes it just takes time, and we're not at that point yet where we can talk about, let's talk peace. No, we're not at that point yet. We are not at that point yet. All right. So, the Giants. I wanted to mention this about the Giants because, you know, I like watching the games on TV versus being at the actual park. The Giants are playing the Mets. They're at Citi Field. It would be great to go to Citi Field. It'd be great to see all the ballparks. However, when you have a reasonable sized TV screen and you have a comfortable chair and you have all the beverages you want and no one's like charging you $50 for a beer, I mean, it's just a better situation overall, just to sit and watch. Now, it's even better when they have the camera stationary and they show the people in the stands. It's really interesting to get the center field camera, right, zooming in on the batter at the pitchers, the batter at the home plate, and then the pitcher, right, winding up and throwing, and then to see the crowd, the attendees of the game behind the plate. I often end up watching them more than the game. I mean, the game moves at a snail pace, so you can watch those people. And because I'm Filipino American, Asian American, whenever I see a Filipino in the stands, of course I say, oh, you know, my Filipino gar. My Filipino dar? Yeah. It just goes off. They're Filipino. I turn to my, look, there's some Filipinos there. And so there they are behind the stands or behind the home plate. And I'm watching the whole game. The Giants were losing yesterday. So it was interesting to watch just the Filipinos. And there they were. They must have been eating through 80% of the game. They were just, having a good time. And none of this, I brought some lumpia from home for Baon. I bought a sandwich from the deli. No, they were eating ballpark food. You could tell. And they were munching. They were chomping. And I was just happy to see them. A Filipino sighting. And everyone who was watching that game, I'm sure they saw it and they said, the Giants aren't playing so well, but these Filipinos eating their hot dogs are kind of interesting. But do they know the hot dogs are Class A carcinogens? Processed foods. Yeah. Maybe they shouldn't be eating it. They wouldn't be laughing. But you know, life is good for these Filipinos. Behind the plate. Behind the plate, they have their tickets. They have to be doing well to buy behind the plate tickets at Citi Field, eating their hot dogs and their beverage, smiling all the way through. The Giants had lost the game, but I was watching the Filipinos. There they were. Wow. The Giants are losing there. And they're laughing and smiling. They must be Mets fans. Anyway, I loved watching the Mets and Giants at Citi Field. I would have loved it better if the Giants won the doubleheader, which they lost. They won the next game. No, they lost that game. They lost the third game. They won the fourth game. And today, man, this is a lot of games they're playing. They lost the fifth game today to, I believe they were down in the eighth inning, but I believe they lost today at Citi Field to the Mets. Anyway, this is why we have sports. So we don't have to argue about politics, and you don't have to argue with your spouse. This is ideal. Finally, today, regular listeners to this program know at this point, we meditate. At this point, we just forget about the past, forget about the future, and try and think about the now. Try and think about where we are now. We're mindful. We're in the moment. We're presently in the moment. So aware of what we're thinking, what we're seeing. If your eyes are in that half gaze, what we're thinking, what we're feeling. I was leading a meditation the other day, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, Emil, I just love just not zoning out, but just doing nothing." I said, yes, that ultimately is what we're doing. We're just being in the moment, appreciating it for what's there, what's around us, and we're doing nothing. We're not stressing, we're resting, we're doing nothing. And it's so relaxing. And all you need to do it is 12 minutes. The studies say 12 minutes is that's long. You could do it for as short as 1 minute and maybe 3 to 5 minutes on an intermediary level. But if you go 12 minutes, you get the full benefit of what it does for the brain, what meditation does for the brain, what it does for your concentration, your clarity, your equanimity, and what it can do to help ease the stress of your life and help you understand and see deeply about how you might feel the way you feel. Like maybe you feel, I always like to finish off with a loving self-compassion meditation. Just as a reminder that you belong, that you are okay, that you're worthy, that you're enough, that you can go do it. And if you don't feel that way, then here, this is simple. Take this hand here, put it here like this, take this hand, put it here like this, and just give yourself a gentle squeeze. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease.